Today I'm going to be having a brief talk about watercolors, and this talk is going to be about particular importance and use for artists and aspirants who are picking up watercolor skills, right? So many a times my students have asked me, about how do we avoid certain, what we call as uncontrolled brush marks, right? So I'm going to be sharing a few pointers, but I'm not just going to be sharing pointers. I have very little time and I want to do my painting as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint. I'm going to show you a little bit of my ongoing painting. And while I do that, you'll be able to see me paint, and I'll be telling you about how to exercise control over your brush marks, right? So before we begin and before I start, before I flip my camera and start painting, I would love to tell you that when we say that we want to have a particular type of brush strokes, right, in a painting, in a particular area, what do we exactly mean? There are times when we mean that in that particular area, you want a specific type of brush strokes, or you don't want a brush stroke at all. You just want uniform color, and you don't want to see any patterns. You don't want to see any lines, right? Just uniform, plain blue or plain whatever colors, plain wash. That is called as wash. Now, there are times when you want very precise lines, for example, or very precise shapes, right? How do you get that? There are lots of techniques. But at the core of it, what matters is how you are introducing. What is all of this? You're introducing colors on a substrate, right? And you have three things that are going to settle down together, right? For the longest run, they're going to be settling down together. And what are those three things that will settle down together forever? So there will be your pigment, which is your color. There will be a medium, which will act as the carrier or vehicle, right? And then there will be the substrate or the paper surface. So these three things, actually play with themselves, with each other, and make sure that they have a suitable arrangement when they settle down on paper the way you want it to be, right? Now, there's another thing that plays a role, right? All these three things are going to stay together, but there is also your brush that you're going to use in order to help them settle down, right? So your brush, the water, the paper, and the pigment. These are the four things that impact how you control or how the color is going to settle down on the paper, right? So first thing is we are not going to be able to control. Let's say you've already got a paper and you don't have control over the paper surface, right? So the paper surface is as it is. Now you have control on the amount of water that you introduce, and you have control over the amount of pigment that you introduce. So each of these two are vast subjects that you have to learn and develop your knowledge and also your intuition through a lot of practice, right? So it'll become your subconscious competence once you practice and a lot of practice. So your intuition will develop to tell you how much pigment, how much water. Right? That's not something that we're going to talk about today. So the only other thing that remains is your brush. And trust me, if I say that the choice of brush plays a major role in helping you get the right kind of color layout on your paper, I wouldn't be wrong. Believe it or not, I would say 90% of amateur and so to say, even sometimes 90% of what is the level? I'm not getting the word. Whatever, 90% of learners make a mistake while choosing the right brush. Okay, it's important. Maybe you can use any brush to do any painting, but you will say some of you might argue that well, I can do this much part of my painting with a very small brush and then finish it and then do this part of the painting with another small brush, right? Yes, you can do it. There is no right and wrong. But an ideal way of doing a painting professionally or with expertise means that you have certain level of control over a large area or a very small area, either ways, right? So if you have to do that very professionally, what you have to do is choose the right brush for the right kind of finishing that you want, right? So you might ask, how do I choose it? So let's flip the camera. I'm going to be painting. I can keep talking. So let me stop talking and show you the painting actually. And let me flip the camera here and I'll explain like what kind of brushes you need to choose while doing different kinds of painting areas, right? The finishing that you want. So this is a part of my upcoming painting. Let me know how you feel. How is it looking? It's nowhere near completion till now. And I'm still working on the very elementary stage of the, not elementary, but very probably around 40% done. And another 60 to 65% of it remains to be done. Okay, so see, my natural style is not to go into a very high level of detail. Very nitty-gritty small details, those are not things that I usually go in. But this painting, I love it because it has given me an opportunity to look into the high level of details that I'm trying to capture. Right? So now, let's say I want to do a very minute detail here somewhere. Okay. Let me turn on the light. So let's say I want to do a small journal, and you can see how small this is. This is my hand, by the way. Okay, and these are minute, small details that I'm trying to capture. So if I try and use, let's say, this brush. Okay, this is not a very thick brush, but this is a number 4 round brush. Okay, so do you think using this brush would be a good idea for painting something very fine here? May not be. Okay, but I cannot discard this possibility right away. Okay, it's number 4. It might as well be a good brush. Okay, so how do we determine whether this is a good one? I mean, it is a good one, but is it suitable for this particular purpose or not? So I have to wet the brush, okay, and see if it comes to a very fine point. Can you see? Does it come to a fine point? It doesn't. It's not a very fine point brush. Can you see that? Right. So if I try to do a very fine detail with this brush here, maybe this is not my right choice. And if I try to do it that way, what will happen is I will not get the right finish or the finish for the painting that I want, right? But at the same time, this is a small brush, and if I want to do a small wash kind of a thing, right? A shade. See, as I'm doing now, I'm adding to the shade here, right? So I can do that because that is that doesn't need a very fine tip for your painting this particular area, isn't it? So you see, not every small brush size is meant for doing fine lines or very fine details, right? So for now, so this is a smaller brush. I don't want this. But now let me take another one. And this is not a very expensive brush, but this is a number 3 and a number 3 round brush again. But you can see it's much more pointed. Where is it? Here. Okay, it's much more pointed. Let me see. So with this, can I do a logo of one of the boxes in one of the boxes? Maybe I can. Okay. Let's say somewhere here, I want to do a small logo. Okay. Can I do it? Let's do it. Okay. And if you think that it is not large enough, then you can always use a magnifying glass to see what you are typing, or sorry, what you are painting. And do it. Somewhat like this. Okay, so are you able to see? Maybe not. Let me show you 1 second. So what did I do? Oh, this is okay. This one is not helping me. So let's see here. And I'm gonna see if I can magnify this. No. Okay, so I have basically done a very thin, using a very thin, but not 000 brush, right? This is still a number 3 brush, but with a very pointed edge. I've done a small logo right here. So what is important for us to do fine lines is a fine tip, right? A fine tip is important. But about now you might think this is a fine tip brush, fine, but how do I know whether I have to use a very highly detailed brush, detailer brush, something like this? Can you see? Can you see this? A detailer brush, okay, or a round brush. Let me show you both side by side. Okay. Which one should we use? Can you tell me? So see, what is the difference between these two? One has very short bristles. One has very short bristles. Where's my hand? Yeah. One has very, very short bristles, lesser number of bristles, pointed. The other one is longer bristles, more number of bristles, and fatter, right? So what will happen is, in effect, this brush will hold more water and pigment, and this will hold lesser, isn't it? This will hold much lesser. So this will give you lesser number of brush miles. Run for a lesser distance in one go before you reload, as opposed to something like this, where you get to, run for a longer duration or for a longer mile. It will give you more mileage before you reload your paint, right? So that is one of the things. You need to choose the right brush in order to ensure that your brush marks, particularly the precise ones, are of good control. Right? Now, some people think that the choice of brushes doesn't matter. It may not matter if you don't want it to matter, but it does help you get a lot of precision, and it helps you get a lot of so to say beautiful finish without struggling, right? It is like your tool that you use for your warfare. The sharper your tools, the easier your battle becomes. Right? Okay. The second common question that many a times I've seen people, try to answer for themselves is just the opposite, right? And what's the opposite is basically, how do I ensure that and this is a very common problem, right? They have to do a uniform wash on a large area. So for instance, let's say this is a very large area where you have to do a wash, right? You have to do a uniform color. How do you do that? So let's say, let me take a rough sheet here. And you want to do a wash here, right? You would say, how I have a number 3 brush and I want to do a whole wash of this area. Can I do it with this brush? I will say, yes, you can. Nothing stops you, but the finish will not be good because you will be doing a small area at a time, right? And if I show you, it's in color. Okay, I've applied water. Again, my brush is ending. I mean, the pigment on my brush is finished. So I will again load, and I will again load it here. Okay, this is still a smaller area. So you will again have to go back every time and do a wash. Right? So it is more likely that your wash is not going to be uniform if you use a very small brush, isn't it? It's like trying to, do the icing on a cake, which is 2 kgs, a 2-pound cake, with 2 spoons of butter. Icing, what is that called? With 2 spoons of icing sugar. Okay, so obviously the cake will not get covered uniform. But let's say this is not a very big wash, but for this brush, it is not the right size. Okay, so if I have to do a uniform wash, my size of the brush should be ideally it should be proportional to the size of the area, to the area that you want to paint. So what do you do first? With a larger brush. If you want wet on wet, you can do wet on dry ones, whatever wash you want. Wet that area. And because you're using a larger brush, which is comparable to the size of the area that you want to paint, it's comparable to the area that you want to paint, you are having to do lesser number of runs back to your palette. Have you seen relay races? So here it's very much similar to relay races. How many times your brush has to go back to the palette, pick up color, and then again come is what makes a lot of difference while you're doing the wash. So see, I have just loaded my brush probably once, and I'm doing it twice because I meant it to do. So just with almost one brush stroke, you are able to cover the whole area. Right, so this will give you a much more uniform and brush stroke free painting. Okay, so to summarize what I wanted to say is the tip here is that whenever we need to decide on a painting or decide on a wash, I want you to meet someone. Somebody is acting naughty. Can you recognize him? He's grown up. This is our Einstein. Einstein, say hello. Say hello. Okay, so whenever you have to choose an area to paint, you have to consider what is the size of your area that you want to paint. Choose a brush that is proportional to that area. If it's a this big size painting, if you're doing a 4 feet by 5 feet painting, buy yourself big brushes, right? But if you are doing a painting which is A4 size, okay, for those paintings, do you still need those big brushes? No, you need smaller brushes. If you're doing smaller paintings, buy detailer brushes, okay? Use, and not just buy. Sometimes what happens is we as artists are very forgetful to the extent that while painting, we become so engrossed that we do not remember to change the brushes. Isn't it? Hasn't it happened with you? So if that has happened with you, then remember to change your brushes. Using the right brush at the right time is an essential skill for a good painter, for a good artist. Okay, and the brush. So spoken about brush size. What else is it? In order to control and make sure that your the painting area has the finish and the finesse that you want, the most important thing that you need to focus on is time. Okay. Many people will say many things like wetness level, the paper quality, that yes, everything matters, right? Now, paper quality is something, I think it depends on the choice of the artist. I'll leave that to you. Now, when it comes to the wetness level, it's a matter of time. Remember, even if you pour a bucket full of water on your paper and leave it for 15 days, it will eventually dry up, right? So it's not about the amount of water only, it's about the time, right? So this is one exercise I advise and make my students do. And I would love to share it with you. Wet down a paper completely, okay? Wet it completely, large paper, and try to paint different things with different levels of paint thickness, consistencies at different times. First, try to paint on it when it is just immediately after you've soaked it in water. After that, give a 5 minutes break and paint something on it. Again, give a 2 minutes break and paint something on it. That way, till it becomes completely dry, and see the difference that you get in your brush strokes, keeping the brush load consistent, right? Try that out and let me know what you find. It is fascinating and interesting to see how pigment properties change based on the surface tension of water, right? So the amount of water that's there on the surface of the paper plays so much of a role in giving the finish and the finesse to your paintings, right? So I hope that helps you in your painting journey. Do let me know your observations and thoughts about how you ensure that your brush strokes remain within your control, or you like them loose and uncontrolled. That's wonderful if you do, right? So we often need a combination of both. I would love to hear any tips and tricks that you have to share about the same thing that I spoke about, right? So, yeah, I think with that, I'll take leave for today. Happy painting, everyone. Bye-bye.